Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, it's been an interesting few weeks. We've had the return of X-Men '97. We've
We sure have.
we've had new competitions announced and taking place as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just been a lot going on. We're now into the bye week of MLR. So we've had opening rounds where all the teams are playing, and now we're
Mhm.
sadly being deprived of Sunday fixtures of MLR action. So did it feel weird having no Sunday games this past weekend?
I don't know, man. I'm more curious. Like, should we circle back to the X-Men '97 start of the podcast? Like, you got any thoughts on the show to start? Like, you could have used that Sunday with no MLR games to get caught up on X-Men '97 if you
Absolutely.
Invincible, Shogun, some good TV happening right now.
There is some good tea. I think I was just thrown off because of your Doctor Doom t-shirt that you're wearing.
First of all, it's an MF Doom t-shirt.
But it's in the comic book style,
It
and
is definitely in a comic
Doom.
book style. Yeah.
Also, Doctor Doom, not a mutant to my knowledge, but
Not, but he has a mutant army now, though. If you've been keeping up on X-Men, they kind of went over and messed up Krakoa pretty good. If you're following along in the comics, it's not a great comic book time for X-Men right now. Not to say the quality of the comics is bad, but they're kind of they're kind of being treated like how the rest of MLR is treating Anthem Rugby at the moment. Just taking a couple L's in quick succession at the moment. But yeah, as it's not a good sign when Marvel titles your book Fall of blank blank, right? Krakoa era's coming to an end. It's been a bit of a tough time. X-Men '97 is so cool though. But now that we got through the my little nerd spiel there, yeah, man, rugby's obviously been good. It's been a pretty interesting start to the season. There's plenty of exciting storylines through the first 6 weeks. We're a third of the way through the season. We'll get to all some of our top picks for exciting storylines right now. And it's been a great season. It's been really competitive. Teams are playing in better stadiums. Broadcast looks better. It just generally feels like the league is taking a bit of a step up this year, and giving me something to watch when X-Men '97 is not on TV.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that. But first of all, this is a Canadian rugby podcast. Let's talk about a bit of Canadian rugby news that's come out. And that is that the Arrows Academy is still kicking around. We did mention previously that there is a competition of the East Coast Rugby Championship, and in their conference, they will be facing Quebec and New England. But there's also been the announcement that the Arrows Academy is working in partnership with Rugby Ontario on a 3-phase plan for 2024. So the notes of it is that phase one, there'll be regional hubs for open training sessions led by both the academy coaches and other Rugby Ontario coaches. These regional squads will participate in the East Coast Championship matches that are set to take place in May and June. Phase two, there will be approximately 60 selected players to participate in a centralized showcase of Ontario East versus West. And from there, we'll have phase three, which will be a final traveling squad selected for the 2024 Coast to Coast Cup in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the week of June 17th. So the dates coming up is April 14th and 18th are the Eastern and Western Ontario Talent Combines, respectively. Locations to be determined. In May, there will be a game against the Atlantic Privateers on May the 11th at the Crescent School in Toronto. On May 18th versus Greystones RFC. On May 19th versus the Quebec Senior Men at Twin Elm Park in Ottawa. On May 25th versus the New England Free Jacks Independence Academy in Syracuse, New York. And June the 2nd to be determined with the outcome of the Eastern Conference of the East Coast Rugby Championship. And they will be playing a team from that conference on June 2nd. June the 8th will be the East-West Showcase at Fletcher's Field. And then June 17th to the 22nd will be the Coast to Coast Cup in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So, yeah, a lot of rugby coming up for the academy players, which is always great to hear. The big thing that stands out for me is that game is in Syracuse between the Free Jacks.
Hey, why not? I guess. I don't know. I
I think why is the first
what who
question.
did Canada randomly play in Spain that one time? That made no sense either. What game was that?
South Africa or Brazil?
Well, were both of those in Spain? Because both of those are weird if they're in Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a field availability thing. Maybe it helps. Maybe it's a travel thing. Cuts
Mm.
down. Although I don't really know. Like, I feel like that's kind of Toronto going a little south and New England having to come. I don't know. I don't really know. That's not my biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway is we finally got like, I guess, real concrete press release of like the Toronto Arrows Academy is
Hmm.
alive. Right. So, I think that was obviously one of the biggest concerns when the Toronto Arrows folded from Major League Rugby is, the impact that that would have on Canadian rugby as a whole, right? And especially like the Arrows Academy is obviously a big part of that because that became a pretty big place for developing rugby players to kind of apply their trade, get a little taste of ML. Some players from the Arrows Academy played MLR games for the Arrows last year, right? Like,
Yeah.
they got that call up in like very quickly. Brendan Black, for example, is one of those guys. Hank Stevenson as well, right? Like, there was guys in the Arrows Academy that played MLR games while they were part of the academy. So it's obviously like was being looked at as a key develop part of the development pathway to develop Toronto Arrows.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't have the Toronto Arrows anymore. But it's really cool to see that the program is continuing. Um, it's still called the Toronto Arrows Senior Academy, the Arrows
Mm.
Academy. That's the only real wording that's kind of used. There's the Rugby Academy is also kind of used as well. So I'm not really sure like where they kind of stand on, I guess, owning. I guess I don't know. I guess that's a question for Tim Matthews, where they kind of stand on like owning the rights to use Toronto Arrows and all the logos and names and stuff affiliated with that. But regardless of what the name of the program is, it's great to see that, you know, an elite rugby academy development program is still existing in Toronto.
Hmm.
Big name coaches, obviously Jamie Cudmore, who was signed on before the Arrows folded. Right, you
Hmm.
got Shane Cahill, who was an Arrows coach as well, and Noel Reed, who played for the Toronto Arrows and is a former Premiership player, right? So like
Yeah.
that's obviously great to see like that quality of I mean, Cudmore too, being a former player. Obviously he played in France for a big chunk of his career and Canadian national team legend, right? But it's like to see like that quality of like former players and like as the coaches of the academy is brilliant to see. And it's great to see like a pretty solid spring schedule here. Maybe there's more games to perhaps if it all goes well, maybe there'll be more games to come later in the years. But it's like, the Eastern Canada like rugby championship seems like a great thing for Canadian rugby. I've been saying for a few years now that it's like, whether MLR is kind of ready to do it, but it's like there needs to be a level for the players that aren't quite ready for MLR to go and play elite rugby to help develop to make that next step. And it kind of seems like people in Canada, whether it's the Arrows Academy, Atlantic Privateers, everybody involved in the East Coast Rugby Championship, there was an announcement of the Prairie Fire coming back this week too.
Yeah.
Um, right? It's like and even like the Vancouver Highlanders, because they, doing creating like their events and their fun schedule playing. Who are they playing again? They were playing like Germany and Brazil, right? And like
Yeah.
they were playing some great teams. So it seems like there's a lot of people taking it upon themselves to maybe kind of create that level that's maybe a step below the MLR. Right. And I think that's a pretty great thing. And I I can't wait to see how the schedule will start. The East Coast Rugby Championship, some of these exhibition games, Coast to Coast Cup. It's a lot of elite rugby in Canada that has been quite frankly missing um for the past few years. So it's nice to see an elite level kind of return at the domestic state of the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, like you said, it was a main concern that there would be no
Yeah.
development pathway in Toronto. Obviously, we knew about the Highlanders at the end of last year, the rebranding of the Atlantic Selects to the Privateers. But, in your biggest city, having no pathway, so to speak. Um, but obviously,
That's kind of the thing now, right? Is like they got like that old kind of, I guess, Canadian rugby championship. Like they're kind of, it seems like that's kind of getting like rebuilt in a,
like the CRC.
yeah, like not necessarily like the linear way, but it's like you got like you got like there's a big hyper, like the Vancouver Highlanders are obviously out in Vancouver,
Hmm.
right? Then you got like, I guess, the Prairie Fire being resurrected here. So like you got a
Hmm.
team to represent the Prairies. You got Arrows Academy being like Ontario, Toronto, Ontario, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you got a team out on the Atlantic coast, right? So it's like
Mm.
those are kind of like the four regions that used to be that championship are kind of
Yeah.
covered, right? So it's like, I don't know. It's not that I think it's like directly coming back, but it's like
It looks like the work is being done,
yeah, like
like the foundations are being laid, and
yeah, exactly. And it's like that's something that I think like I think we are kind of missing that like you obviously want to like people I think we want to develop players from like a rugby point of view. I know the Vancouver Highlanders have like are trying, helping guys get like jobs and stuff in other fields and things like which is a great thing to be doing. Um but like from the point of view of trying to develop players for like a national team or you know professional ranks of rugby, like like seeing elite setups popping in like after the arrows have folded, seeing like we've now seen like the Highlanders were technically before the arrows folded, but like the Highlanders, the Arrows Academy, again technically before the arrows folded, but like the Atlantic Privateers, I guess Prairie
mm,
Fire and stuff. It's like there's like this slow like every like these like high performance programs are now starting to kind of pop up across the country. Um, Being run by various different people, various types of thoughts on how it should be run, which I can only really see as a good thing. Hopefully, it all
yeah.
kind of works out. We need that level of
Mm.
competition. Even bringing in the New England Free Jacks Academy as well. It's like that's a good team to kind of target because like they don't really have. I don't know if they really have anybody at that level like around them either. Especially now that there's no like New York in MLR too. There's no New York Academy, which I know they used to play a lot. Um,
Yeah.
it's just good to see like all like I know like a domestic elite level of rugby kind of re-emerging within Canada. And like I mean I'm excited for it. I'm like I don't see
Yeah.
how you can't be excited for this.
Yeah. Um, some of you may remember that there was also the Quebec Ontario Rugby Championship, which was um, women's teams playing, representing Ontario East and West and Quebec East and West as well. The first round has also now completed. Um, the only information we can get is that Ontario East beat Ontario West 41-7, and Quebec East beat Quebec West 22-16. So the current table has Ontario East followed by Quebec East, then Quebec West followed by Ontario West. And there are 6 rounds of this tournament, and the next round is to take place this Sunday, April 14th, at Queen's University in Kingston. So good luck to everyone involved in that. Sorry if I can't give you any more details. This is all the news that comes out, really. You can find the results on different social media accounts. So Rugby Ontario has the results for round one. and Rugby Quebec has the results for the Quebec games. So hopefully, as the competition carries on, more information will come out. We do have a list of like the try scorers as well, but you can find all that information on the social media pages of both Rugby Ontario and Rugby Quebec. We've been talking about the Canadian rugby. Let's take a step away for a moment just to go south of the border because MLR has been plodding along and, without the arrows, as we've mentioned, but there are still Canadians immersed in it. And so we're now a third of the way through the 2024 season. And, different stories are coming out, following from like different teams, different players. So, what we're going to do now, Derek, is we're going to talk about the six stories that we feel have emerged from the first six rounds. So, we're going to start on number six, work our way up. If we mention something that the other person is mentioning later,
Yeah.
we'll hold off on that and we'll go to that story when we get to it.
Just say, yeah,
Sounds good?
sounds good. I was just gonna say we should maybe clarify for the listeners that both me and yourself have made our own separate top six lists.
Yeah.
We have not seen yet. So we're going to kind of go through it. Yeah, if we have a repeat story, we'll talk about it once. But like, I don't know. Curious to see what's been going on because I mean, we haven't. I mean, we did the interview with Mitch Richardson, which was obviously Dallas Jackals heavy.
Yes.
We haven't really talked a whole lot about the MLR season this year. We've kind of focused a little bit on the goings on in Canada outside of when we interviewed Mitch Richardson and Lucas Rumball, right? So it's like kind of curious to see what your thoughts are. So
Yeah.
shall we get going?
Okay, yeah, I'll start. I'm coming in at number six. Very late, but I feel it's appropriate for the late entry team. Um, with a team name like Anthem,
Mm,
you can hear the silence that is coming from them. This was a different team. It's not going to be
yeah.
funded the same way that other MLR teams and it's done in conjunction with USA Rugby and World Rugby. And it's like these are going to be the guys that are going to come through and help make the USA competitive at the 2031 World Cup and help qualify for 2027.
Mhm.
So let's check their results, and I'd say it's not great.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that now, obviously, with it being such a short turnaround from the team being announced to actually coming onto the pitch, there was obviously like concessions to be made. A lot of these guys are academy players for other teams, and yes, there are internationals thrown into the mix, but this isn't a team representative of USA Rugby, I believe, at the moment. I think it is doing what it needs to do in the sense of it is getting guys more exposure at the highest professional level in North America at the moment. But in a competition where results and victory is obviously the key measurement,
Hmm.
being winless at this point is not the best look. Now, and I will say that is not without Anthem did pull themselves ahead at halftime in a couple of games, only to then falter in the second half and continue to their losing streak. But
I
when a team being touted as the way it is, I think that there may be some people that already have question marks over them.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I think like they are a development team, and
Yeah.
in all reality, it's kind of weird to have a development team in the highest professional league that is available to play in on your continent or in your country,
Hmm.
right? They joined the league late. They had, I don't want to like they signed guys that were obviously part of the development program. They kind of reinforced the roster with a few internationals, a couple guys, as you said, a couple guys on loan. I think the thing with Anthem right now is, I think right now it's just like you said, they have guys that are on loan from other teams, things like that. I think it's just they got a little bit of a depth issue, at least in compared to other MLR teams, right? Which isn't really a shock, I don't think. Like you kind of look at the last game that they just played against Utah, right? And it's like that game was pretty close until Utah scored what, three tries in the last 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then blew that score open. They kind of got blown out by Dallas. They kind of got blown out by Miami. Um, I think they've been kind of finding ways to stay in other games and then just kind of fade in the second half, right? Which, you know, is to me sounds like it's like when their bench comes on, that's kind of when it starts to kind of fade. And if in the event of a game like Miami, like Dallas, I think even like NOLA, where it's like the other team gets off to a hot start, it becomes really hard for them to come back. But
Yeah.
like they're a brand new team, they're a development team.
Mm.
I was actually thinking about kind of putting this on my list. This is the one
Mm.
story that I kind of cut, but yeah, like
All right.
the fact that they're 0
Okay.
is rough, but
Okay. So what's your number six?
so honestly, my number six, because I actually was going to mention Anthem and their 0 6-ness, but I decided to cut it because I wanted a little bit more positivity to start this
Mhm.
off, and you started it off with that anyways. So at least we're somewhat on the same page. So honestly, though, I'm going to kind of circle back to it's not maybe not technically an MLR story, but it's an MLR adjacent story. I'm going to circle back to something we just kind of talked about. And I'm going to say my number six story is the Arrow's legacy continues to live on, which obviously we just talked about the Academy, which is great. But another thing came out this week, or last week, which I was kind of surprised by and also thought was really cool, which was Sam Malcolm, the aka like heart of a lion, the king of drop goals, ice in his veins, the greatest player in MLR's history, and a whole slew of other nicknames. But he has been named one of the backs coach for the Aurora Barbarians,
Mm.
right? And also has started like a little rugby, like a kicking academy, a little coaching, I guess like a coaching setup of his own, like that he's kind of running. And you can check out his social media for like it's called Between the Posts. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's at Between the Posts, which is like Sam Malcolm's new, like, I guess training program, kicking academy. So it's like if you're interested in that, I would definitely go check that out. But I think it does go to show like kind of the impact that having, despite the fact that the Arrows aren't here anymore, it does kind of go to show the impact that an MLR team can have in the area.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
because you have a guy like Sam Malcolm that is now sticking around and coaching in Toronto, right? You have with the Arrows Academy, right? The Noel Reid, premiership player, is one of their coaches. He was
Mhm.
obviously brought over here to play for the Toronto Arrows and did play for the Toronto Arrows. And now that there's no Toronto Arrows to be playing for, he is coaching the Arrows Academy, which is a great thing. Another thing that did come up this week is that Vince Carter is being inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame, right?
Mhm.
And it's something that I know I've said on the podcast before. The players that the MLR is going to benefit the most are not the players in the league right now. They're probably like 10 to 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I think something like Sam Malcolm starting, to coach around here, um, you know, Noel Reid coaching around here, the Arrows Academy still going, kind of shows that because to circle to my comparison to Vince Carter and being inducted in the Hall of Fame, right? Think about all the kids that got like, are maybe, 20 to 30 years old that got to grow up watching Vince Carter. And then look how many of them are in the NBA. Canada's now
Mhm.
winning FIBA medals. It takes time, right?
Yeah.
And I got back to the FIFA World Cup about 15 years after TFC started. It takes a little bit of time, and the Arrows legacy kind of seems like it's living on within Toronto right now through the academy, through guys like Sam Malcolm, um, you know, coaching. club rugby here, and I know there's a handful of other players that all are still playing at their are planning on playing at their other clubs and stuff too over the over this summer season. So it's like
Yeah.
impact is still there. Hopefully, it kind of continues to stay in that direction. I mean, I would love to see a team back in Toronto, obviously, but it does kind of show the impact that an MLR team can have on rugby in the area. It is still sad that it's gone, that team is gone, but there's some positivity that seems to be coming out of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what is your number 5 pick?
Number 5 right now is I'm going to go with the undefeated Houston SaberCats right now.
Oh, I want to talk about them as well.
Yeah, all right. Well, we can do that. Now, where did you have that ranked on your thing? I put them at 5.
I've actually put them at number 1.
You put them at 1. Oh, okay. I got a couple other things. All right, fair enough.
All right.
You want to
Okay,
talk about it at 1?
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about near or 1. Okay.
Yeah, all right. We got to give it credit at 1. If you're giving it 1, I'll move mine to 1. Okay, we'll talk about the Houston SaberCats later.
Okay, no, my number 5 is I am talking about Canada South. It's the New England Free Jacks.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked before when prior to the season starting of like how uneven that the conferences now are, because you look at the conferences and you have Miami and Anthem both in the East, and Chicago moving on for the East as well. We have DC, NOLA, and then we have like the Free Jacks. Now, obviously, last season the Free Jacks were one of the most dominant teams, the most dominant team in the East, and it's starting out pretty well for them this year as well. I mean, they opened their first game against Anthem and got pounding victory 13-46. Then they went up against Old Glory DC, their first loss of the season by 1 point. And then I think they've been more muted compared to last year. I think obviously losing John Poland is obviously going to have a big impact on the team, but there is a lot of depth in the squad as well. Give opportunity to other players to come through. But with the exception of their recent game against Miami, their other games have all been within like 7 points. So Hounds 17-22, and against the Gold that was 27-21, and obviously the loss to DC. So when they're winning, they're still being kept honest by the other teams, and when they're losing, they're still close enough to obviously get like the losing bonus point. And we all know that DC won that game with like the last kick of the match, so you can look at it from a lot of perspectives. But I think the idea as well is that when you go into any season as the defending champion, you basically, no matter what kit you're wearing, you've got a massive target on your back.
Yeah.
Like every team is going to come at you saying like, if we can knock the champions down, then obviously that's going to be a huge boost for us. And especially it was for DC, as you can see from the aftermath of that game. And so I think as well that with that in mind, I think we haven't seen the best of New England yet. I mean, obviously we're only a third of the way through, but when we get to like 2/3, when we're properly in the business end of the season, I think it's going to be, the Free Jacks of last year coming out looking to secure their home playoffs. I know the playoff structure has changed, so they don't get that bye week anymore, but it's definitely going to be one to keep an eye out from. Like at the moment, they can afford to allow other teams to get like losing bonus points. And the only teams that they have comprehensively beaten are, the new teams, the Sharks and Anthem. So I'm like saying, obviously, the most Canadians for a team in
Not the Canadian
MLR. So, just keep an eye on them.
My thoughts on that are, first of all, you only need to win by 1. Win's a win. You only need 1. That's it.
That is true.
Wins are wins right now. And even in saying that, New England is has 19 points, the top of the East,
Hmm.
right? They have a game in hand on everybody except NOLA in the East, and they're
Yeah.
4 points clear of NOLA, right?
Yeah.
So they're very well clear of everybody else right now. Um, and everybody is still like they're not playing good. And I'm like, I don't know what they have to really do. Like, you don't need to win every game by 50. Like, you can win games by
Hmm.
like 1 or under 7. No one cares if you give like you know like if you win your 5 points, that's all that you really know. They have 3 bonus points. So it's like 3 out of their 4 games wins, they got bonus points in. But the other thing is, I think, as you kind of mentioned, right, what are they going to do for the rest of the season? Are they going to kind of, hit a bit more of a stride? Because I do kind of agree with you that I don't think they're playing to their best this week, week 7 against the Houston Sabercats in Houston.
Hmm.
I know it's your number one story, so we won't talk about the Houston Sabercats just yet, but that's going to be a big one for
Yeah.
both teams, I think, because I think that's going to be a little like that could be like one, that's a potential finals preview, but two, I think that's a
Yeah.
little like that's a chance for both teams to send a message to the rest of the league for what their
Hmm.
intentions are on in the 2024 season.
So I'm going to move on to number 4.
Mhm.
And that is we're moving to the West. We're going to be talking about San Diego for
Oh.
a little bit because, last year they were like, all right, we went 15-1. Now we're going to go 16-0.
Hmm.
That clearly didn't happen. They've already taken one loss for the season, but I think that San Diego are still proving that they're one of the teams to be keeping an eye out for in the West. They'll be looking for their home playoffs as well, and there are 5 out of 6 games played so far with that only one loss. They're currently on 19 points. They are behind Houston and at the moment Seattle, but obviously once everything's happened, we'll be able to get a conclusive idea of where they are. But even then, Seattle is 5 points ahead of them. That just means San Diego just need to get that bonus point victory, and they're right back up there in the fight
Hmm.
um, with that team, with those teams. And so, and I think when it comes to San Diego, it's like we've seen for a couple times this season that they really, hit the gas in the second half and they can turn games around as well. Utah back in 2021, they would be able to turn games around in the second half. And like you said, you only need 1 point to win it. And for San Diego, like that's what their mentality kind of has been for this season so far. As in, like, it doesn't matter where you are at halftime, as long as you're winning by the end of it. Now, admittedly, the Miami Sharks did run them pretty close, and as well as Los Angeles. Um, but yeah, that characteristic the old Pacific rivalry between Seattle and San Diego went the way of the Seawolves.
Hmm.
But since then, they've been able to get it out, get the job done necessarily, and just keep proving to everyone that they're still
Hmm.
one of the teams that have been here since day one, and they're still got that you know big challenge mentality about it. And the Legion, obviously, they've been to multiple finals now to come out on the losing end. So I think the Legion are going to be really hard pushed to finally lift that shield this year.
Yeah, my only question with San Diego is Matt Giddo going to actually play, or is he having too much fun on the 7 series?
I think there's something of like contractual issues and stuff, and it's like it was always planned that he was arriving late. Got to have that mandatory round of
Gotta
sevens
go
in
party in
Hong
Hong
Kong.
Kong first. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like, do you guys know that the Hong Kong sevens is during week 6? Like, I got places to be, parties to be at. Yeah. All right. So I guess my number 4, we're going to go to Chicago Wolves. Where's the Chicago Wolves? That's a hockey team. We're gonna go to the Chicago Hounds.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this what was up with this weird Billy Meeks playing fly half experiment?
Yeah,
And are we all in agreement that that we hated this? Like, I did not understand this at all. Um, the Hounds obviously have a couple different um like fly half options. Cardi,
yeah.
which came up a lot because Cardi's USA eligible and stuff, and people kind of want to see him play fly half. But obviously they I don't know, like I feel like they had Meeks at fly half. They were kind of struggling in their attack, right? And then they finally moved him to center with Carl Say at fly half, right? And 4 minutes into the game against Seattle, they go, Carl Say gets the ball, passes it to Meeks. Meeks moves it on to Brown. They score a try 4 minutes into the game. Like, why? Like, why did it take so long to be like, yeah, let's. Billy Meeks is the best center in MLR. Like,
Mm.
why did it take
Yeah.
you so long to realize you should play that guy at center? Right. And I'm using this Seattle game example. I'm ignoring the blown 26 nothing lead. We'll push that aside. And
Yeah.
say that like they did look better, ignoring again the blown 26-point lead. Right. They did it again against NOLA. They did Carl Say at 10, Meeks at 12, and it was probably their best looking game all year.
Mm.
Right. Easily their best looking game all year. And I just don't understand why there was the experiment through the first 4 games of the season of having Meeks playing fly half. It's so weird. It's like could you picture like the Kansas City Chiefs being like, "Hey, Travis Kelce, we know you're the best tight end in the NFL. Play quarterback." Like you wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like Tampa's not asking Andre Vasilevsky to play center, right? It's like you have the best in the league at a position. Like let that guy play that position. Hopefully
Mm.
the Hounds never go back to this again, and they can probably make the playoffs. So they look really good when they're actually, playing guys like Meeks where they should be playing. Also, Carl
Yeah.
Say's unreal. Let Carl Say cook with the ball at 10, man. He can do some magical things.
All right, let's move on to your number 3 pick.
Okay, my number 3, fun one. Obviously, I think this was a huge story this year. And Jameson Fanana Schultz gets suspended for 5 games.
Mm.
You're cringing. You have any thoughts you want to get out first, or did you have this
Uh,
anywhere on your list?
no, I didn't actually.
Yeah.
I
This was
think
a fun
this,
time on MLR, every MLR social media page.
yeah, a lot of people had a lot of opinions about
Oh, there's so
this.
many opinions.
It's one of these things of like, oh, if you play it as like real time, then it is essentially
That's
taking a player out in the air.
Yep.
But then there's loads of other opinions of saying like, oh, well, why did Meeks jump into the
Yeah.
ball? And it's like, because he was trying to get the ball.
There's
And
nothing that says he can't jump.
yeah, nothing says he
Um,
can't do it. Nothing says that Fernanda Schultz couldn't have jumped for it at the same time.
there's
Um,
so yeah. So like obviously, I I put this story here not so much because I want to like relitigate the debate that's been had everywhere on whether or not he should have been suspended and stuff.
yeah,
Personally, I think his previous disciplinary record is the thing that really hurt him here. I don't really know
yeah,
how I don't know. I kind of just feel like that's the MLR setting a record, like not setting a record, but like setting like a precedent of like we don't forget your previous red cards, which
yeah,
which were for, by the way, like ridiculous things. They were
yeah,
for like normal rugby things. But like I think the biggest thing with this is it's like um you obviously watch the play and it's like
yeah.
there's absolutely no way he did that on purpose. Right? Meeks
Mm,
jumps, kind of flies over him. I honestly think he tried to catch Meeks so that he didn't land that hard. Right? Like I think he actually probably helped Meeks out and
mm,
maybe is a reason why Meeks wasn't hurt. But like it did kind of spark like a weird debate of like, hey, like I don't think he intended to do that. Well, it's like, should he be suspended anyways? Because it doesn't matter if he intended to do it or if he right, because you can't suspend intent necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's like, should it matter if he intended to do it? In a similar way. It's like, and then people start arguing like left and right. Um, there's, just there were so many arguments coming from both sides, and it was fascinating. And to be honest with you, that's the reason why I put this story here, because no matter what side of this debate you landed on, if you think Jamison Fernandez Schultz shouldn't have been suspended, if you think 5 games was right, if you think maybe it should have been somewhere like 2 or 3, maybe even 1, right? No matter where you kind of landed on it, I just want to say that from like a fan point of view, how much kind of fun it is to be able to have these debates, because there was a time in MLR where we would like literally would not announce suspensions. They right, like they wouldn't announce suspensions.
Mhm.
You'd just be like, "Oh, this really good player that happened to get a red card last week is out. I guess we'll see how long his suspension is based on when they put him back in the lineup." Right. And it's so nice that those times are gone. I know this is not the first year that the MLR has announced suspensions, but I feel like this is the first really like controversial suspension, which got, it was talked about on podcasts. There's endless blog discussion about it. There's, just so much going into like that of like fans being able to interact with just arguing over how long Jamison Fernandez Schultz should have been suspended for. And also the fact that Jamison Fernandez Schultz himself put out like some tweets about the suspension, which was
Yeah.
awesome, by the way. And also Old Glory DC put out a thing being like, we disagree with this suspension, which was also great because that's something that's never happened in MLR before, where we actually see like teams kind of openly arguing with like disciplinary positions. That's that's kind of fun in a way, right? At least in my opinion,
Yeah.
that's kind of fun. So I'm
Mhm.
putting in this suspension here, not necessarily to like debate whether or not he should have been suspended, because that's kind of over. Although maybe I will say that I kind of feel like he maybe should have got. I'm kind of in the give him 2 or 3 range.
Yeah.
But and honestly, the 2 or 3 is just because it's a repeat offender, and even if it's
Mhm.
even if it's an accident, you can't really do it. Um,
Mm.
but I think it was just fun to be able to be like, honestly, it was fun to see everybody arguing about it.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to sit here and say I hope we get more suspensions, because that's a ridiculous thing to
Mm.
say. But
Yeah.
it's fun now that, like, as the league has grown, the transparency of the league in their disciplinary decisions and things like that has also increased. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, it's a weird part of the game, but it does allow for more fan engagement and stuff and things like this, things like trades. I think I don't like need to be presented by the league, because it does create and lead to a lot of discussions. And it'll probably be a pretty big story when Jamison Fernandez Schultz does return to the lineup because of his
Yeah.
suspension, right? So, and yeah, he's a good player and stuff. And Old Glory looks like they definitely miss him right now. So I think
Yeah.
they're
I
definitely
think
doing that suspension.
so. This is obviously something that has claimed headlines, and
Yeah.
like my 2 cents on it is that Fernando Schultz has spent like the past couple of seasons with a clean record, and um and I think it may, like, obviously I don't know what conversation he had with like the staff at Old Glory DC, but for someone who had clocked up multiple suspensions
Yeah.
in his career at that point,
The
it's
longest
basic.
suspension in MLR history, by the way.
Yeah.
Like he has that. That's under.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I
it's
think
that kind of thinking of like, I can easily imagine a coach or staff saying like, look, you're really good, but you're also your own worst enemy at this point. So
but I think
we
sorry, I'll let you finish. Sorry.
yeah. So either you clear up your act, or we'll trade you to
Yeah.
somewhere else, or you're basically out of MLR because you're too much of a liability.
Well,
And obviously it takes that on board, 2 perfectly clean seasons, but it doesn't erase your
that's
record.
that's my biggest takeaway of it is
Mm.
like because obviously like if you look at the MLRs, like the disciplinary page that they do have, right, like they do have a section of it that is like off field mitigating factors, right?
Mm.
For a lot of at least the suspensions this year, there's a lot of like the only notes. There's been five to six suspensions this year. Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
it's like the only note in the off-field aggravating factors is either not applicable or previous disciplinary record, right? So
Yeah.
I think like I think what this says to me, and we'll see how well this suspension ages, I guess is going to be kind of my,
Yeah.
but it's like what this kind of says to me is it's like the MLR is not going to forget like
Yeah.
add stuff. It doesn't matter if it's been like a couple of years since you've gotten suspension or you had a clean season last year, which he
Yeah.
has. Like fair play.
Yeah.
He has been, and even this, like I don't think this is a particular dirty play. This is, I think it's a fluke, right?
Yeah. I
But
think it is just
it's
like
not a dirty
wrong
play.
place,
Yeah,
wrong
it's not a
time kind
dirty
of
play
thing.
at all. But it's not a dirty play at all. But I think this suspension does kind of, give a little insight into how the MLR is going to go about suspending guys now that we have six previous seasons under their belt to be like,
Yeah.
hey man, like you've been suspended a lot before. Maybe it's been a couple of years, but it's like you've been suspended for doing stuff before. So it's going to impact it'll be interesting. Obviously, it'll be interesting to kind of see if that's a trend that continues. If guys
Mm.
who have previous suspensions start getting like suspended for more games than maybe another player without the suspension would have gotten,
Yeah.
whatever. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to see how that unfolds and stuff.
Mm.
Um,
All
but
right.
again, I just think having these discussions is fun and it's something we
Mm.
weren't able to do in the early days of MLR.
Absolutely. Okay. My number three, and this is going to go back to Mitch Richardson because we have seen Dallas in like massively improve
Yeah.
from previous seasons. And the players that are really shining are the Canadians.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. Yeah.
especially like so obviously this weekend just gone, Kotzer got 5 tries
Yep.
for the Jackals. And they've obviously brought in Nick Ben, Mitch Richardson, but they've also got like Brock Gallagher as well coming into the squad.
Mhm.
And I think that
He's been really good. He's been there for a bit, but like he's been really good this year too.
yeah, so I'm still waiting on that all Canadian
Yeah.
front row.
Front row.
But
That is so
but
good. I don't know if Steve's. I don't know how much Dallas wants to do that.
they don't want the guaranteed win and just to scare the league.
Oh yeah, maybe
Yeah.
that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, and they started off with the victory against LA, which was hoped or not. I don't want to say a given, but obviously new team versus established team.
Yeah.
You expect that. A losing bonus point against San Diego. Surprise of no one, a dominant win over Anthem.
Yeah.
A loss to NOLA, a narrow loss to Houston at the death, and then another close loss to Seattle. But these are teams that they have like losing records against already. So you can kind of
They got losing records
understand.
against everybody.
Yeah, not against Anthem or Los Angeles, but yeah, I get where you come
Yeah.
from. But in the sense of these are games that in the past were like blowout
Yeah.
losses and stuff. And obviously we saw like last season they got the double over Chicago and the win against Toronto. And it does feel like they are coming along. And even the games that they are losing, I think there was like 3 of them have all been in like losing bonus point range. So that's what puts them above Utah at the moment. Again, not much. Dallas do have like an extra game in hand, but at the same time, still got as many wins as Utah at the moment, and all these bonus points they're racking up, that could be all the difference come the end of the season. So, but yeah, I think Richardson, Ben, Kotzer, they've all had the opportunity to really show themselves, and it's really coming together for them. And just as we've always said, great to see Canadians doing well no matter where it is. And yeah, it seems to the Jackals environment is really suiting them all. So congratulations to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kotze's the guy making headlines, right? With the
Yeah.
a try night, 9 tries total. Like Richardson's got 4 too. Like he's among the league leaders. So's Ben Lesage, by the way. I don't think we mentioned that when we were talking about New England. But like, and Co's also up there. I don't know if he's going to come up in our list later, but
Mm.
like, I absolutely love watching Dallas right now. They're really fun. Obviously, they got a huge monster set piece that's absolutely rolling right now. But I think like they got a lot of solid players, like you said, like Richardson, Kotze, Sam Gala is an absolute mutant. To circle back
Yeah.
to X-Men 97, Sam Gala is a mutant, man. And like he, like he's in his like second year in the league. He's might be the best player at his position in year 2
Yeah.
in the league. Like he's insane. Um, and I think like you have Gala, you got like Zeiss, Foley's there, Olivier, their scrum half has been great. Von Isaac's been good at fullback, right? Like you have all of like a lot of really good like players that are still developing, surrounded by some vets like, Juan Pablo Zeiss, Roland Foley's there, Damon Torres has been good, Gomez Vara has been good, right? Like they have a really good team, and watching them right now, I don't know if they're how big of a step they're going to take this year, but if they
Mhm.
can keep a lot of these players around next year. They can keep a lot of their coaching staff around next year. They are going to be a problem for Western
Mhm.
Conference teams next season. They might be a problem for them this season. It seems like the one thing that they need, like you mentioned, the Sabercat game and the Seawolves game, is they just like they're a young team. Obviously,
Mhm.
the guys that have been there for a while, some lean years in Dallas, right? Like 0 and 16. Like, what did they have? Like 2 wins last year. Right? Like some lean years. They have to learn how to win. Right.
Yeah.
And they have to learn how to close out those games. If they can do that, they're gonna be a problem for the entire league. And it's coming
Mm.
soon.
Oh yeah,
It's coming.
absolutely.
They're my favorite team to watch in the league right now.
All right. Okay, now moving on to number twos. And staying in the West, and it is a team that is showing a lot of promise,
Mhm.
but they are their own worst enemy. I'm, of course, talking about Los Angeles. These guys, oh, oy vey. They started out incredible,
Mhm.
you know, start to the season with that loss to Dallas right at the start. And you go to statistics. What have they got to show from that game besides a losing bonus point? Well, they have 4 yellows from that game alone. We then
Mhm.
carry on. Now, fortunately, against Sabercats, that was another loss, no bonus point there, but also no card as well.
Yeah.
Um, Against San Diego, they pick up another yellow there. Conceded 12 penalties in that game, 11 against Houston, 21 against Dallas. And then you have them get the victory over Utah, but they're still conceding penalties, 16 penalties in that game, 2 yellow cards. And then of course we have the game against DC that ended in a draw. Um, you know, Now they did get 4 tries, so they did get the try bonus point as well. But again, 14 penalties conceded, 4 yellows, 1 red. Like,
It's a tough way to win some games if you don't have 15 guys on the field for most of it.
exactly. Like this disciplinary issue is their biggest
Yeah.
problem. The fact that they are currently on, they have one game in which they didn't get a yellow card or any card
Mhm.
of any variety. But you know, by the time we're 1/3 of the way into the season, and they are already on, I think it's like 11 yellows and one red.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to win if you do that. Like they do need to fix that up. Um,
Yeah.
you know, like, and yeah, like they're struggling because of it, right? And they're probably
Hmm.
losing games because of it as well. And but to circle back to what you kind of said about Dallas, sometimes it's fun to point out when Canadians are doing well. Matt Heaton's been a tackling machine. He's responsible for a couple of those yellow cards though.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
as especially for a guy of
yeah,
Matt Heaton, this is a guy who is like co-captain for Canada when
yeah.
he's available, and he's picking up so many yellows,
Yeah,
it's not a good look.
Co got a yellow, but he leads the team in tries. So we'll tell you. Well, I'm going to focus on the positives while you keep ripping apart these yellows here. I'll talk about all the Canadians leading the team in certain stat categories. Although apparently you probably got to tackle a lot if you never have 15 guys on the field. But like
Yeah.
it all circles back. Um, Hopefully they figure it out. Maybe if they named their team,
Hmm.
maybe that would
Yeah.
inspire them a little bit more. Actually name their team. That's my theory, anyways.
Hmm. All right, what's your number two?
So my number two, a bit of a more of a league wide story, I think.
Okay, all right.
Kind of league wide, DC centric, maybe. Great and Bowed. Do you know what's special about Great and Bowed, Stu?
I think I know where you're going. He is the only domestically classified player
Yeah,
to start at fly half
yeah,
in MLR.
yeah. That's it. He started game one. For Old Glory DC. Since that game, DC has been rocking Jason Robertson, as their starting fly half, right?
Hmm.
And Bowd came in. I believe he came in the game last game to replace
Hmm.
Robertson at 10. He's been doing that. So he's still playing 10. But yeah, there is like no fly halves in domestic fly halves in MLR other than Graydon Bowd. We've talked about this on the podcast as well before. Like Graydon Bowd is also over 30, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm not too sure how many World Cups he's got in him or World Cup qualifying tournaments he's going to have in him, right?
Hmm.
Maybe one, maybe one. But like, and that's not to say that he's playing bad. It's definitely not to say that Old Glory should play him over Jason Robertson. I'm not critiquing that coaching decision. Similarly, I'm not critiquing any of the other 11 teams for starting a international fly half, except maybe Anthem, only because aren't you supposed to be a U.S.
Yeah.
development team? Maybe you want that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
But
think that. But I agree in the sense of,
yeah,
for the other teams, like Anthem excluded, this is a league competition where winning games is the priority. And if to do that, if you need to get a foreign player like from Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Europe, or any, and if they're not American or Canadian,
yeah.
that's where your international
Well,
player allocation is going to go.
yeah. And I think that's exactly why I think this is super interesting though, right? Because I know like I know that there was a handful of fly halves that were drafted in the collegiate draft last year. They've maybe have played games in MLR, but they haven't been playing
Mm.
at fly, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of effectively makes them not fly halves if you're not actually playing fly half
Yeah.
in
Yeah, it makes
MLR,
sense.
right? Like you are whatever position you're being converted to by your team,
Mm.
whether that be fullback, whether that be wing, right? Like, for example, I will say, just to compare, right? A guy like Nate Augsburger, right, was a scrum
Hmm.
half, right?
Yeah.
Last year, San Diego decided that's not for you. We have
Hmm.
a better option there. Put him on the wing, and he's been playing wing since, right?
Yeah.
Um, Nate Augsburger can 100% play scrum half if you need him to, right? He can 1,000% do that, right? But
Hmm.
right now he's a winger, right? Like that's what he is playing. So what I'm trying to say is that currently Graydon Bowd is the only domestic player actually playing fly half in MLR. And
Hmm.
to your exact point, The MLR teams are trying to win. It's a club competition. They're trying to win. They're going to take whatever players are available to them that they're able to sign, and they're going to put the best guy in that 10 jersey.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not faulting teams for doing this. What I think is really interesting, though, is what are Rugby Canada and USA Rugby going to do about this?
Yeah.
Because, right, like, for example, we got Canada's got to play Scotland in the summer.
Yeah.
USA has to play somebody. I don't pay attention to their schedule.
They're
They got to
they're
play
also playing Scotland and
also
Romania.
cool. They're playing the same teams. Excellent. That makes it way easier on me. But it's like they got to play these games, right? Who's
Hmm.
your fly half, right?
Yeah.
Because like for Canada, okay, so is it great and bowed? Because if it's not great and bowed, who, like, and who and where is that guy coming from, right?
Yeah.
Is that a,
Is it going to be
is
is
that
it
a
going to be
pride?
Volpovi, who hasn't
Oh,
been getting many? He's
who,
coming off the bench.
yeah,
Is
barely
it
playing at all.
is it going to be Shane O'Leary, who's been, starting at
Well,
fullback?
back, but that's see though that
But again, not all games.
Spencer Jones, I think, but he's been playing center, right? Spencer Jones has played fly half for Canada. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
he did, right? It's like, is it going to be like a pride player? Do you bring back like, is it Cooper Coates?
Hmm.
Because it's like it's not really, and for the USA, I guess McGinty or whatever,
Mm.
but like it's not going to be an MLR player,
Yeah.
like, or it probably will be an MLR player, but that MLR player wouldn't have played fly half for like 6 months, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like, and I think that's the point where it's like if you circle back to the Anthem thing, if Anthem's going to be a development team, like I feel like Anthem has to be the one team that's like we need a domestic 10 starting. Like somebody has to start it, and it's got to should be the development team officially, right? Because like it's it'll be interesting when it's like because like I said, it's like Great and Bowed is over 30, right? Like someone's got to be the fly half for like the next generation of Canada here, right?
Yeah.
To take you through like qualifying, to take you through the 2031 World Cup, right? Is that Great and Bowed? Like, is that going to be like a 38-year-old Great and Bowed at the 2031 World Cup? Um, right? Like, I don't know, but like it, we got to start developing other guys, which is that's exactly why I think all this stuff like the Arrows Academy, the Highlanders, the Eastern Canada Rugby Championship and like
Yeah.
Coastal Cup, all that stuff's important because it's like we need fly halves. We need scrum halves too, by the way.
Yeah.
There is a lot more domestic scrum halves, both in Canada and the USA, that are like playing in MLR, right? But even at that, like I still kind of think of like the two best scrum halves for Canada right now. You can let me know if you disagree. Ross Brody and Jason
Yeah.
Higgins. Brody's obviously
Yeah.
right, you okay, so you do agree with that? Cool. So
Yeah,
like
I agree with that.
Brody's obviously playing for in South Africa.
Yeah.
Higgins is backup in Chicago, right?
Hmm.
But the key point of that is both of those guys are, Canadian, right? But they also grew up, Brody grew up in South Africa and Higgins grew up in Ireland,
Yeah.
right? Like we need to develop halfbacks, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, I think ultimately what the MLR has done this year, with the MLR teams, I think have slowly kind of phased out a little bit, right? Is they've kind of identified a glaring hole in Canada, Rugby Canada, and USA Rugby development in the sense that there's no fly halves
Mm.
for either country really. And
Mm.
they've identified a huge hole. I think we're seeing that in the roster selection, team management. Hopefully
Hmm.
some guys are going to step up soon. But I'm
There's
very
something.
curious to see how Rugby Canada and USA Rugby deal with this because
Yeah.
you can't force MLR teams to play domestic guys.
Yeah.
That'll never happen, right? Maybe you can force
No.
Anthem to do it, or maybe USA can force Anthem to do it. But like, we're gonna have to develop that, or we're gonna have a hard. I think we'll have a hard time going into international games trying to get centers, wingers, fullbacks to play
Mm.
fly half. And then, in Canada's case right now, you might get a guy that hasn't played fly half in a few months playing fly half against Finn Russell. So
Yeah.
that'll be a good time. Be a good time.
Yeah. And okay, so what was your number one? Was that your number one prior to me talking about Houston, or did you have a different number one?
That was my two. That was my two. I have a different number one. That was my two.
Okay, all right. What was your number one
So
then?
my number one, actually, to be honest with you, was something that we did you kind of touched on. I didn't really mention that you touched on it, though. I probably should have.
No.
So we'll try not to rehash too much. But
All right, to the point then.
yeah, because it was awesome. Dewald Kotze had 5 tries in a game. Like what?
Yeah,
Where are we? How is this not one? Obviously, like record-setting performance. Five. I
yeah,
beat the old record set by Dean Muir a few years back, right? Freaking incredible. Like it's just the dude had 5 tries. The next, Reese McDonald is second in the league in tries right now. He has 5. He's second in the league with 5. The old Kotze
yeah,
did that in 80 minutes. And like, yeah, it's incredible. Too bad the Jackals lost.
yeah,
Kind of ruins it. Reminds me of when Austin Matthews scored 4 goals in his first game and the Leafs lost anyways. That's kind of the same sort of vibe to it. But yeah, like it's kind of crazy. And I'm like, I think I can kind of tie Kotze into like, you know, a lot of Canadians finding themselves at the top of the try leaders right now. You got
hmm
Saj is up there, as I've mentioned. I mentioned Coe's up there, and Richardson, friend of the show, is he's also up there too. And you kind of talked about how great the Canadians have been playing. The Jackals Maul though, like, is perfection at this moment. Because even like some of those maul, I know every try came off of a maul, and some of those tries, um, but like they weren't all like 5 meters out. Like there was some distance on those. I did find it interesting though too that how on pretty much all of them the backs just immediately ran in. Like
yeah,
it's very clear that that's going to be something that um Dallas is going to use. That was also done against Seattle, famous for their seawall defense, and they cut through that like butter, man. And to circle back to our point earlier about how Dallas is going to be a problem, um, in the MLR, if nobody can stop your maul, you will
yeah,
win a lot of games. And right
yeah,
now, it doesn't look like anybody can stop this maul. Kotze's got 9 tries in 6 games, um,
mm,
5 of them in the same game. But like, he's creeping up near like, try per game, and they're using their scrum to set up tries. They're using
yeah,
balls to set up set pieces on fire. Um,
hmm
and congrats to DeWalt Kotze, man. Like you're
yeah.
and to
It's
anybody
very
that's
impressive.
saying that like, oh, it's just like the hooker scoring tries at the back of the mall. That's the hooker's job.
Yeah,
Kotze is very good at his job. You
yeah.
should be doing that.
Uh,
Yeah, if your mall's working, like, damn, like it's Dallas is going to be scary. Like, I think we need to prepare for like the reign of the Dallas Jackals at some point in the future here, man. They're going to be scary. But yeah, that
mm,
was my one. I know you kind of
okay.
mentioned it, but it's too awesome to not,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Okay.
So now we got to talk about
So
the other team in Texas.
yeah.
You're
So these are my number one because when MLR first started, one team gets to win, but one team has to come last. And that was Houston. And then 2019, it expands, plays 16 games. They only win 6, lose 10. They finish 7th overall. They miss out on the playoffs again. 2020, of the 5 games they played, they only won 1. And in 2021, they play 16. They only win 2. That is statistically their worst season they ever had, only 13 points, bottom of the Western Conference.
Mhm.
And then in the off season, they make the decision to hire Henk Meyer as the director of rugby for the Sabercats, and he brings in
Yeah.
Pote Human,
Yeah.
and we get the name the Saber Box because of big South African influence. Lots of South African players come over, finding that US passport that their grandparents had somewhere lying in the attic. And they go from winning 2 games and losing 14 to winning 9 and losing 7. And it's the first time they make it to the playoffs. That because of everything going on with the Gill teams at that time, they were the only Western team to make it on merit instead of succeeding from the disqualifications. And then last year, they go one better. They win 10 and lose 6, and they make it to the playoffs again on their merit. And now we're in a position where Houston are undefeated in the MLR season so far, the only remaining team to do so. 5 games played, 5 wins, and I think it shows what patience Houston have had and has allowed the team to develop, allowed players to make their mark on the team, really put in the competition to say, okay, this is working, this isn't, this is what we need to sort out. And yeah, it shows the investment required. It's shown the, um, you know, this is a team that has been on the rise for the past 2 seasons. And now they're the ones that are standing on top of the mountain. As I said, 5 games played, 5 won. They are on 23. Seattle has won 5, lost 1. What are they on? 24. And, Houston always, when they started, like I said, they were bottom of the tables. They could only get a few wins. They only got 2 wins in 2021. And now they are showing again that they are improving year on year. And now, obviously, we got them up against New England, so this may all be for naught, but this shows the resiliency of the SaberCats, um, front office and the everyone working behind the scenes. This has been what they have been working towards. This is the culmination not of 5 games, but of multiple years of investing in the team, the academy, and they are now reaping the rewards now.
Yeah, man. I think exactly. For all those reasons, I think it's a great story. I had it a little bit lower on my list, but under completely when you word it like that, I totally understand why you would put it at 1. Um like they've been incredible, and like you said, it's it kind of speaks to the idea of sticking to a plan and kind of understanding and executing that plan, right? And they've been having an unreal season. Like you said, they got a big test this week against the New England Free Jacks, the defending champs, also the best team in the Eastern Conference. So as mentioned earlier, it's a big chance for both those clubs to kind of lay down a marker, message of intent for the rest of the league. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of firing on all cylinders right now. They got, an unreal set piece. Their attack is insane. They can score from everywhere. Their defense is playing very well. They're making all their tackles. They're very well structured. It's tough for teams to find gaps in their defense. And not technically a Canadian, but former Arrow, so I'll say he's an honorary Canadian. To Talatasi Tassi has been arguably like one of their best players.
Yeah.
For, over this season here, he's got a couple man of the match performances, scoring tries, picking up huge meters, making tackles. He's been an absolutely unreal pickup that they may not have had if it wasn't for the expansion draft or the dispersal. Excuse me. So it's been quite the season for them, right? And we'll see if it continues. Big test this week, man. I think it's
Yeah.
New England versus Houston's pretty much must see TV.
Yeah. Definitely one to watch. Well, those are our 6 of the best stories from MLR so far. And yeah, the story's still ongoing. One third of the way through the season. We've yet to see what stories are still to be told. And like we said, so we just mentioned the Hong Kong Sevens. If you want to watch the Singapore Sevens that are coming up, that is available on Rugby Pass TV. Likewise, we return back to the Women's Six Nations, which is available on the Zone. And you can watch the MLR games on the Rugby Network. And we are in the quarterfinals of the Champions and Challenge Cup, which is available on epcrugby.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at the Rouge Rugby with episodes of the podcast. And make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. You can also find us across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all at the Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
At Reset the Jet across all social media platforms, and I think it's kind of interesting how our lists didn't really overlap all that much. Lots of great storylines through MLR's first 6 weeks here, and let us know if we missed anything as well, because there's a lot been going on. Let's be realistic here.
Again, that is Brezette the Jet. If you have any complaints about any stories that have been missing, and you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.